Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from St. Augustine, Doctor of the Church, while we read his book, Confessions. Hello, Catholic pilgrims. St. Ambrose shows up today. I think you are really going to enjoy this short reading where we hear about what St. Augustine initially thinks about St. Ambrose. We will be reading from Book 5, Chapter 13, on page 107. So, when the prefect of Rome received a request from Milan to find a teacher of literature and elocution for the city, with a promise that traveling expenses would be charged to public funds, I applied for the appointment, armed with recommendations from my friends who were so fuddled with the Manichaean rigmarole. This journey was to mean the end of my association with them, though none of us knew it at the time. Eventually, Symmachus, who was then prefect, sent me a test to satisfy himself of my abilities and sent me to Milan. In Milan, I found your devoted servant, the Bishop Ambrose, who was known throughout the world as a man whom there were few to equal in goodness. At that time, his gifted tongue never tired of dispensing the richness of your corn, the joy of your oil, and the sober intoxication of your wine. Unknown to me, it was you who led me to him, so that I might knowingly be led by him to you. This man of God received me like a father, and as bishop, told me how glad he was that I had come. My heart warmed to him, not at first as a teacher of the truth, which I had quite despaired of finding in your church, but simply as a man who showed me kindness. I listened attentively when he preached to the people, though not with the proper intention. For my purpose was to judge for myself whether the reports of his powers as a speaker were accurate, or whether eloquence flowed from him more or less readily than I had been told. So while I paid the closest attention to the words he used, I was quite uninterested in the subject matter and was even contemptuous of it. I was delighted with his charming delivery, but although he was a more learned speaker than Faustus, he had not the same soothing and gratifying manner. I am speaking only of his style, for as to content, there could be no comparison between the two. Faustus had lost his way among the fallacies of Manichaeism, while Ambrose most surely taught the doctrine of salvation. But your mercy is unknown to sinners, such as I was then, though step by step, unwittingly, I was coming closer to it. Since we have hindsight, I think it's easy now to see the path God worked with to bring St. Augustine into the Catholic faith. Augustine starts out learning how to be a good speaker, then he becomes a teacher in rhetoric, speaking, and literature, and what do you know? Someone in Milan needs a teacher of literature and elocution. Just the place that St. Ambrose, an intellectual heavyweight, happens to be at. Now, St. Augustine likes him at first, as far as friends go, or at least maybe as a kind of father figure, but he's not overly impressed with his speech-giving abilities. They're fine, but St. Augustine even says he feels a bit contemptuous over how he delivers speeches. He even admits to not really listening to the subject matter to see if there is truth to be had, but he's just more interested in the delivery. Now, people fall into this error all the time, and it drives me nuts, though I'm guilty of it myself. And people get in arguments with me online about online personalities fairly frequently. And usually what will happen is that they will have this person that they really like listening to, and they'll send me a video. And usually they send me a video of someone who is speaking very assertively, almost aggressively, an overconfident way. Usually they're kind of snarky, or there's just a lot of hype around their video. But when you listen to the person's words, you can easily point out problems with their arguments, but the packaging makes it truly hard to listen to what they're saying. They just sound so convincing that what they say must be true. And I get having a polished, enjoyable to watch, interesting video. I get that. I try to make interesting videos myself, but I want people to listen to my words, not just be entertained by my daughter's video editing skills. We need to pay attention to the substance and the subject matter and be critical thinkers. One of my favorite apologists is Jimmy Akin. Nothing about his videos are flashy. Usually it's just him sitting in what looks like his office at home, which is very bare, while he's discussing a very interesting topic. And he always lays out the argument well, coherently and charitably. And I do trust that he has done a thorough job looking over a topic because, well, he just shows you in the details from both sides of the argument. And usually it takes him a long time to go over both sides, which I really do appreciate. What the person is saying is what matters. I mean, it matters too how they are saying it. We should be charitable, but we have to weigh the truth of what a person is saying based off the arguments, not the delivery. St. Augustine is only paying attention to the surface level tangential things when it comes to St. Ambrose. He needs to look at the arguments, which, as we know, he eventually does. So that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. Tomorrow will be our last reading from Book 5. But until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.